I'd like to invite now Sarah Lange, or Sarah Lange. How should I pronounce it correctly? So I like both. But Sarah, I asked Sarah, what is the interesting fact about you? And she said, like, there are many. No, actually she didn't think. She just said that I'm kayaking. And I think we have the best kayaker in the room, but also the best expert on the, kayak, like small boats, човники. На човнику кататься по речке, в озере, море, океане. So Sarah will tell her story. Please, Sarah, welcome to the stage.
Okay, so I'm the last one, I believe. I get the pleasure of being last after everyone's a little tired. So if we need 5 seconds to stretch, twist and turn, please take your 5 seconds and move a little bit. I will really give you 5 seconds, and then I'll start. So my name is Sarah Lange, and my specialty is transforming communication environments in the most difficult places in the world. And that means changing habits, changing mindsets, and bringing more secure communication practices to people who need them most. And just as a side note, we have determined that journalists are the worst possible group to work with. You do have that distinct honor. So please don't come and ask me for training. But anything else afterwards, I'm open to talk about. Just kidding. So what I want to talk about today is something that I know is a bit of a risk in this room of journalists and educators and academics and activists who are here to talk about media literacy, and it is giving up media. The media fast. So, 14 months ago, almost to the day, I turned the media off. And I'm not talking about just ignoring what someone is yelling about or tuning out a particular story. I mean, I turned it completely off. No newspapers, no BBC, no CNN, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, nothing. I even turned the radio off. And I am a self-professed newsaholic. I make it my business to know things. When I was a teenager, I was the weird kid in the 1993 gold Buick LeSabre, which is a huge car, very old, blasting the latest newscast out my window when I rolled up to school. In college, I was the kid with the Economist under one arm and the New York Times under the other, sitting at breakfast, trying to understand what was going on in the world. And in my professional life, my business is to know things, to know what's happening, what's evolving, what's changing. And for the first time in my life, last year, I was experiencing something that I don't think is unique just to me. Complete and utter political apathy. I mean absolute political apathy. Has anyone else in here experienced political apathy in the last year by chance? At least a few of us, and I'm sure there are a couple more of us in this room. So apathy is something that is usually talked about when we're discussing civic engagement, lack of voter turnout, lack of youth participation in our political systems. It's something that usually happens, for me at least, to other people. So the day I turned the news off, this guy was yelling, and admittedly it wasn't that hard. This is where I live. So I did turn to my kayak, and I turned the news off. So apathy is actually one of the most toxic and insidious threats to a healthy system of government. When we start tuning out, we let other people decide for us. When we choose not to participate, we allow other people who may be minorities or who may have radical views start to change, morph the system, and that's when things can go awry. Apathy is bad. Will these videos play? Anybody know if these videos will play? No? Nobody? Okay, we'll go on. So what I noticed is that there's a lot of noise in our system. There's a lot of noise in the news that we're consuming, the information that we're intaking every day. And that's really the point, is noise. In fact, one of the most effective techniques of disinformation campaigns is to simply flood the system with so much noise that it's very difficult to know what's real and not real. It's very difficult to understand what we need to pay attention to and what we can tune out. And when there's so much noise, our brains actually start to do this instinctively. Subconsciously, we tune out information because we can't process all of it at one time. And when we aren't choosing to tune out information, and it's being tuned out for us, and people who are running disinformation campaigns, they do this very specifically, it doesn't allow us to pay attention to the right things. So the idea was that this is really noisy and that it's hard to pay attention during noise, but we'll move on. So while I was thinking about this problem, I was wondering if it's really something new or if it's just something that we hype up, that feels different because it looks different, if this excess of overstimulation and hyper-informed state of our society is really something different than it is maybe 20 years ago. And there's a researcher in Southern California, this is his name, and he and his research team determined that on average, every day, we consume at least 5 times more information than we did just 20 years ago. And that number is going up every single day. That is a lot of information. So disinformation tactics work by manipulating our emotions and manipulating our reactions. We create a lot of noise, we tune out, and then something really interesting happens. Our emotions become vulnerable. When we are hyperstimulated and we are receiving all of that noise, our brains actually shift from the rational, critical thinking part of our brain to the primal part of our brain. It's also called the lizard brain. And when we move into that space in the lizard brain, do you know what gets our attention? Anger, astonishment, disgust, really strong, visceral, physical emotions that we are biologically programmed to pay attention to. And people who are creating disinformation campaigns and all of that noise, and this includes advertisers or people who are developing clickbait, they use those emotions against us in order to get our attention in that hyper-noisy environment. And we do pay attention to the story of Jason Derulo falling down the steps, which wasn't really true, but we look at that because it's astonishing. We click on things that are gross, and whether we intend to do that or not, it is a byproduct of this noisy environment, unless we're intentional about it. So, what do we do about this? So, I went to high school in a place called Kentucky. It's deep in the hills, it's 100 miles away from any shopping center, and there are more churches than restaurants. So it's a pretty conservative place. And in sex ed class, we learned one concept, and only one concept, which doesn't apply to real life. In fact, it's very ineffective in real life for what it was intended for. But in this case, it has a purpose. Abstinence works 100% of the time, every time. So, I know again it's risky to say that abstaining from the media to this audience is bizarre, but I have a little experiment and it's not going to work. But when this guy is talking, and this is a great clip of him tirading about something, when we turn it off, silence it, all of a sudden, all of those words are harmless. They're rendered completely meaningless. It has no impact on us, it doesn't affect our emotions, it doesn't manipulate us, it doesn't crowd our minds that should be creating and innovating and problem solving with noise. All of a sudden, that silence is what we gain when we tune that out. I was in the park a couple of weeks ago with my little kids, and I met an Estonian diplomat who just left the Foreign Service. And she was burnt out, she was tired, she was thinking that the work that she was doing all of the time, responding to emergencies of politicians, and they work closely with our government, I'm sorry to say, and a lot of them were created by our government in the United States. She wasn't feeling like anything she was doing mattered anymore. And so she left. And she said to me, if we hope to fix anything in this system, we have to fix ourselves first. And I truly believe that. We as individuals need to be resilient to the tactics that are being used to manipulate the way we think, the way we consume information. And I have a proposal for how you can do that in 3 steps. Try a media fast. So the first thing to do is decide how long you're going to do it for. A week, a month, 14 months, and turn it off. And turn it all off and see what happens. And I learned something really interesting when I turned the media off. This practice of physical deprivation is used by all sorts of cultures and religions to cleanse the body and the mind. In the Catholic faith, we fast and we give up things during the period of Lent to restore our balance. And this is similar to what I'm prescribing here. When you challenge yourself to a media fast, go back. Okay. The things that I noticed were nothing bad happened. That's the truth. And maybe many of us might fear something happening if we turn the media off for a little while. But I didn't miss anything. I had a little bit of FOMO, which I didn't know what that meant until recently, but a fear of missing out. But what happened was that I tuned in to my colleagues, my friends, and my family, and I started having more conversations, one-on-one conversations. Number 2 was I didn't miss anything. And I was informed. Through my network, I allowed myself to hear of a story through my physical in-person network and then go and check it on a reliable source online. And I was able to find out the information that I needed from my life that mattered to me. And number 3 is that I had more time to do the things that build my personal resilience to stress. And we all have those things. And I find myself more creative, and I started producing more than I was consuming. And that's a huge transition. I think all of us could take a step in pursuing. So after you've fasted, then we go on the exclusion diet. And I'm almost done, 2 minutes. The exclusion diet is something practiced by people who have allergies. So basically you give everything up to decide what allergen you're experiencing, and you add foods back into your diet one by one. And when you do that, you notice some things. So when we're doing that for the media, ask yourself these questions. As you add a media outlet back into your life, when you consume information, how does it make you feel? If it makes you feel horrible, keep it out. You don't have to consume that information. Number 2, or number 1 in 1, is after you've consumed information and you're walking away, are you ready to use that information and have a meaningful conversation and debate or engagement with other people? Has it filled you up? Has it actually educated you? Does it serve your purposes? And if it isn't, and it's something that my Aunt Betty does, and it's something you take in and you read it and you go, I knew he was guilty. Yeah, I could have told you that, If it's a head nod kind of situation, that's not the information you should be wasting your time with. That's just noise. And number 3 is, are you intentionally consuming information to support your relationships and your work? And if not, it should be for entertainment. And if it doesn't hit that button, it's just noise. And it's taking away creative space that we have, which is a limited product, to solve these really hard and big problems. So lastly, what we're doing when we're making these intentional decisions is designing our own information ecosystem. So on average, adults spend 11 hours a day on a screen. And if we spent that much time in any physical space, we would design it with intention and purpose. And so we really want something that looks like this? Maybe. But I'm far more drawn to this. And when I'm in that space, I feel good. I feel creative. I feel empowered. I feel innovative. And I can actually come up with solutions I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And when you're designing that system, do it with intention. Don't let it happen to you. And if you're already in an ecosystem that's weighed down, think about doing a little spring cleaning. Get the excess out and create space for your own creativity. So finally, as a last thought, is that in this crazy, noisy world, that we can intentionally intake information. And when we do that, and we're creative and we're critically thinking about information, those tactics of disinformation strategies of creating apathy and noise and overwhelm and distraction are rendered harmless. They don't have any impact on us. And we can be our own bastions of creativity and calm, and I think that's how we win the war against disinformation in the long term. So thank you so much for paying attention during this last presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.